Hello everyone, Fred here. In this installment of TPP Dynamite, I'm going to be reviewing episode 2 of Titans Season 4, Mother Mayhem. First things first though, if you haven't already, let me encourage you to subscribe to my channel. I regularly post reviews of films, books, and movies on this channel. I'm also an author of adult and young adult mystery novels. To date, I've released 3 books, The Women in White, The Lethal List, and most recently, Textbook Murder. All of them are on sale now, and there are purchase links in my video description below. With that in mind, and without further ado, welcome to my spoiler-filled review of Titans Season 4, Episode 2, Mother Mayhem. So this episode starts with another strange murder by the raven-masked man from last episode. This time he appears out of thin air in a quiet suburban metropolis home. He freezes a husband in place and he slaughters the dude's wife by slitting her throat. The couple's daughter catches a glimpse of him, and when he sees her, she runs to her room. In true horror movie fashion, the hooded man appears to teleport inside behind her, and he attacks her too as she screams. Meanwhile, Connor has been arrested for murdering Lex Luthor, and he's been thrown into a place called the Detention Center, a facility that continuously bathes him in low-level kryptonite radiation to keep him powerless. Dick and Corey come there and promise to help him clear his name, but Connor is very rattled by having watched Lex die. He says that he's never in his life seen power like what killed Lex. Connor seems resigned to the fact that people will always see him as a murderer because of how he was found with Lex's body. And somehow, despite that kryptonite strips him of his powers, he still has super hearing and can tell that people both inside and outside of the prison are talking disparagingly about him. Nevertheless, Corey does her best to reassure him that she and the other Titans are going to find a way to clear his name. Corey and Dick leave the prison and decide that the Titans need to dig into whatever secrets Lex Luthor was hiding shortly before his death. They figure that learning that information might help them figure out who killed him. Corey splits from the rest of the Titans to look into an empty, secret facility that Lex was maintaining before his death. When she goes there, she runs into one of Lex's research henchmen named Nelson Blake. Blake is very afraid and tells Corey that he's only there because he's looking for a way to save his own life. He informs Corey that Lex wasn't the only one who died the other night. Turns out that Lex's entire circle of closest friends and researchers died too. Blake is the only one left alive. He tells Corey that when Lex first got sick, he started researching Corey herself in the search for a cure, before deciding eventually to begin researching ways to fight the force of death itself. According to Blake, when Lex did that, he began aligning himself with several different cultists, including a so-called archaeologist woman, in messing with dark magic. Before Blake can say any more though, he hears strange chanting. Then he too starts coughing and vomiting up blood from his mouth. He then dies the same sort of death that Lex did last episode, and a snake comes out of his mouth to attack Corey. Corey uses her powers to vaporize it though. Rachel and Dick search the scene of Lex's murder for clues. When Rachel tries to use magic to determine what happened to Lex in the room where he died, she has a vision that leads her back to the same suburban house from earlier in the episode. Gar has Tim in the forest doing a sensory-based training exercise when he hears chanting in his head from disembodied voices that refer to him as Skinwalker. The voices cause him to partially shift into animal form and then pass out. Tim helps him wake up, but neither of them can make heads or tails of what happened to Gar or why. Soon after that, Dick calls them to tell them to meet him and Rachel at the suburban house. A radio is ominously playing in the kitchen when the Titans get to the house. They split up and search for clues all over the house. Dick finds a bloody apple on the floor, while Rachel finds the dead mom in the kitchen, leaned against an island. Rachel also finds the little girl from earlier alive in her room, though the hooded figure has trapped her in a never-ending nightmare. Rachel invades the girl's nightmare to break her out of it. In the nightmare, Rachel identifies herself to the girl as Raven for the first time and learns that the girl's name is Arya. She manages to save Arya from the nightmare after having a brief, dreamlike confrontation with the hooded figure. Corey visits Connor again to discuss with him why Lex Luthor would have been studying her of all people. Connor, who is capable to some degree of thinking like Lex, tells Corey that Lex wouldn't have invested his time in her, particularly when he was dying and had so little of it left, if he didn't expect the endeavor to be worthwhile, or if he didn't think that she could give him something in return, whatever that means. The episode then shifts over to Sebastian's point of view. He has apparently designed some sort of interactive gaming experience that he passionately believes can connect the whole world. He makes a marketing pitch to some bigwigs from whom he wants funding. The bigwigs smile at him and compliment his passion, but turn him down for not having an idea for a video game that's more competitive than community-driven. Sebastian then freaks out and leaves when he has visions of all of the bigwigs with blood spewing from their faces. We also get a little glimpse into Sebastian's personal life when he lovingly visits his ailing and elderly mother in a nursing home before his presentation to the bigwigs. When he tries visiting her again afterwards, though, he finds out that she has tragically passed away and that the home has been unable to contact him until then. This whole scene comes off as being a bit weird for two reasons. First, because the nursing home, for some reason, actually lets Sebastian check in and get to his mom's room before telling him that she died, as opposed to telling him that she died when he first tried to walk in and see her. When he first tried to check in, anyway. Second, it's weird because the so-called nurse who tells Sebastian about his mother's death is a disguised May Bennett, Lex's cult partner from last episode, and that leaves us to wonder whether May had a hand in whatever happened to Sebastian's mom. We already know that it's Sebastian's destiny to become Brother Blood eventually, so is this part of May's campaign to turn him to the dark side, or what? Corey rejoins the rest of the Titans, and Rachel tracks the hooded figure down to a slaughterhouse. They find both the husband whose wife was murdered at the top of this episode, as well as the guy whose girlfriend bought it at the top of last episode, and several other unnamed guys as well. All of them are being drained of their blood for some reason, but they all seem to still be alive. Rachel is attacked by the Raven masked man and manages to subdue him just before he uses magic to incinerate himself. His mask comes off and he turns out to be some random white guy whose face isn't clear to the audience. Once the guy is dead, Rachel senses echoes of something else that's still lurking in the shadows, but it disappears as quickly as Rachel can sense it. Later at the hospital, Dick speaks to Arya and comforts her, saying that he knows how it feels to lose parents. He tells her about how Bruce took him in and says that time will help her deal with the death of her mother like it helped him to deal with the death of his own parents. He then gives Arya his jacket. It is at this point that the episode really begins to not make sense. Dick meets Connor in some sort of skyscraper, and it turns out that Connor's name has been cleared with regards to Lex Luthor's murder. We're never exactly told why. Maybe it was the fact that all of Lex's friends and associates died the way that Lex did, that it was somehow proven that Connor didn't kill them, and that constituted proof that Connor probably didn't kill Lex either. Maybe it was the fact that a similar murder to Lex's happened while Connor was in prison. Maybe it was the fact that the Titans pointed the cops to the bloody slaughterhouse and it somehow constituted proof of Connor's innocence as well. It's never really made clear. Another thing that isn't made clear is how Dick seems to have positively identified the hooded man as Dr. Arthur Homewood, Lex's personal physician. Dick also seems to have identified Homewood as Lex's murderer, and he tells Connor that Homewood must have been involved with Lex in the occult business and must have decided that he wanted to keep whatever power they were seeking for himself, which would constitute motive for the murders of Lex Luthor and all of his other friends. Connor looks over the crime scene photos that Dick provides, and his disgust at both the photos and Lex for getting involved with a cult capable of that sort of evil in the first place is more than evident. He says that he never wants to come back to Metropolis again. Connor and the Titans leave Metropolis that same night in their RV. On the way, however, they're approached by May Bennett, now in a cult-like black robe and wielding a menacing-looking sorceress staff. The Titans, sensing trouble, suit up and go after her, but she makes short work of all of them. She beats Connor and Rachel with basically one burst of magic from her staff. In Rachel's case, May seems to drain Rachel's powers right out of her, which knocks Rachel out, causes the gem on her forehead to disappear, and turns her hair white. May beats Dick pretty badly as well, and Corey ends up saving all of the Titans by using her powers on May. The clash of her powers and May's cause a massive explosion in which May disappears. May later on shows up alive and well in the same temple that she and Lex entered last episode. This time, though, there are runes all over the ground and a gang of chanting cultists inside and a giant pool of blood near the front of the place. When May shows up, she leads them all in a sadistic continual chant of Azarath, Metreon, Zenthos. Anyone who's familiar with the hugely popular Teen Titans series from the early 2000s will recall that that chant was actually the one that Raven used most often in that show to activate her powers. So I guess we'll just have to stay tuned to see what those words mean to these cult guys in this show. As the cultists chant, their voices echo to Sebastian, who's, miles away in Metropolis in his taxidermy shop, and who hallucinates the overflow of his coffee cup with blood. The end. So here are my thoughts. First, the good. I touched on this in my review of last episode, but I am really liking this season's bloody superhero horror vibes. More so than that, I'm liking this season period more so than I have all three of the past seasons of Titans. Again, I touched on this in my review of last episode, but one thing that I think most Titans fans who've been with this show since the beginning will notice is that Titans is a show that tends to improve upon itself season by season. The first season was basically an unwatchable dumpster fire that looked like it had all the budget of a fan film made by a college freshman, plus dialogue that could have been written by a horny, foul-mouthed 13-year-old boy with an ultra-violent imagination. Season 2 had a weak and unimaginative story, and it retroactively contradicted most of Season 1, but at least it had a story. It at least built to something, and the effects at least were decent. Season 3 had its many problems, but it improved once again on both the story and the effects. Season 4, if it keeps up the momentum that it's been displaying in the first 2 episodes, looks like it might be yet another overall improvement over Season 3, which improved on Season 2, which improved on Season 1. Once again, Sebastian Sanger is the unsung MVP of this episode. His whole arc is a little clunky and trite and stereotypical, but you still really feel for him here, which is thanks in no small part to both the material that he's given and Joseph Morgan's performance. Sebastian is a good guy who's trying to do good and who just keeps getting bad in return. Life is kicking his butt so hard right now that when the time comes, I have a strange feeling that I'll be torn between being horrified at the evil that he'll wreak his brother blood and being happy that he's finally kicking life's butt back. I also really like the material between Dick and the little kid, Arya, this week. I've commented before about how one of my many gripes with Titans in its early days was Dick's portrayal as an ultra-violent, antisocial, would-be murderer of criminals, and how it rails so extremely against the centered and friendly and generally cool Dick Grayson of the comics. Well, one major plus this season is that we get to see him inhabit that textbook Dick Grayson role far more so than ever before. He's really become something of a chilled father and mentor figure to the Titans. This episode, that was really on display in how he bonded with Arya over the loss of her mother, and in how he gave her some pretty good advice for dealing with the feelings that she'll no doubt have regarding the whole situation as she grows up. Now, the bad. While I enjoyed the superhero horror elements of this episode, I think that the whole Lex Luthor murder investigation really fell short here, which is a nice way of saying that it made no sense and was generally shot full of gaping plot holes. First and foremost, it's hard for me to buy that Connor actually needed to be proven innocent here when no Kryptonian has the power to tear up a human being from the inside without touching him. It's also pretty hard for me to believe that with as many people as seem to hate Lex Luthor in this show, the cops and the rest of Metropolis would be so fast to ruin a young man's life by jumping the gun and accusing him of murdering Lex. Then it's even harder for me to believe that given how much the world seems to hate Lex Luthor in this show, Connor got treated so badly for having supposedly murdered him. The way people talk about Connor and treat him in this episode, you'd think he was being accused of killing a busload of babies or something. The whole timeline on Lex's plan for creating Connor to be his replacement also seems way off. We've been told that Lex got sick about a year ago and decided to create Connor as his legacy then, but that really doesn't track with the story that we got in Season 2 about how Connor was basically created as a weapon for sale and how Mercy Graves was even authorized to kill him when it started to seem like he was too much of a wild card to be properly controlled. Besides which, it doesn't even feel like an in-story year has passed between Seasons 2 and 4 of this show. Why was Nelson Blake left alive to reveal backstory to Corey about Lex's dabbling into her background and the murders of Lex and the other members of his inner circle? That's another inconsistency with this whole Lex Luthor murder plotline. I mean, I get that the story required for that to happen, for Corey to talk with Blake for exposition purposes, but it's just another plot hole that everybody from Lex's inner circle of friends and co-workers died on the same night, but that this one guy was spared the same fate for a day or two more. The wrap up to the whole mystery was basically a Grand Canyon-sized plot hole unto itself. We never even get a hint of an explanation as to how Connor's name was cleared just by virtue of the fact that the Titans found some guys being drained of blood in a slaughterhouse. We never find out just how Dick knew that Arthur Homewood was the random white dude who burned himself to death once Rachel unmasked him, especially since Dick wasn't even in the room when the guy burned to death. For that matter, how did Dick even get those crime scene photos that he was flashing around to Connor of the guys who were being drained of blood in the slaughterhouse, considering that the Titans rescued those guys before the cops or anyone else could even have showed up to take pictures? It's cool that we finally hear both Rachel and Gar get their respective and iconic code names, Raven and Beast Boy, but we never get any real explanation as to how or when it happened that they got those code names. It just kind of came out of left field. I mean, it was still cool, but I think I would have liked it a bit more if there had been some more context to accompany it and make it feel more earned. Also, on the subject of Rachel in particular, since when did she become such a magic expert? She's basically depicted in this show as being like unto an occult expert regarding sensing and tracking and understanding magic as far as goes this episode. But again, I feel like there hasn't been much build up to it. She hasn't really been in that kind of control of her powers before, like, I don't know, maybe the end of season 3. Maybe there was a little bit more control there on her part. The fight with May Bennett at the end was another major failure for this episode. First and foremost, I got such a laugh out of it when Dick told the team to suit up to face her when she was on the road, because given his own costume, he shouldn't have been suited up before at least an hour had passed. It made no sense how the Titans got ready that fast. It would have taken too long for them to put on all that gear. And once they did, it made even less sense why they all needed to attack May Bennett one-on-one. Like one after the next. Connor and then Rachel and then Dick and everything. At any rate, those are nitpicks, I know, but it's still something that I felt was worth mentioning in a review. Anyway, down to brass tacks. This episode is a pretty good one. It stayed strong with the horror vibes and the bloodletting, which is a major plus in my book. The story majorly dropped the ball in the Lex Luthor murder mystery department though, which I found to be quite disappointing, all things considered. I give Titans Season 4, Episode 2, Mother Mayhem, 3 cronuts out of 5. At any rate, tell me what you think in the comments below. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a like, click subscribe, and please ring that bell. So long.